For 10 years, I have lived as a ghost in my own kingdom. The Silver Keep was once my home, now it is my mausoleum. Every echo of my footsteps feels borrowed, every chamber too vast for a single heartbeat. They call me Queen Elaria Valen, consort of the Alpha King, but titles are poor companions. My name is spoken only in whispers now, like a memory that still lingers in the corridors but no longer belongs to the living. There was a time when my scent filled these marble halls, when Kael's presence burned through them like sunlight through frost. Now, only the cold remains. 10 years have passed since his touch. 10 years since the bond between us, branded by the moon's fire, turned from promise to punishment. The mark on my collarbone still glows faintly in the dark. A ghost light, stubborn and cruel. It should have faded long ago, the way unfulfilled bonds eventually do. But mine never did. The healers call it a phenomenon. The priestesses call it divine retribution. I call it what it is, proof that the gods have a sense of humor. Every morning I wake before dawn, not out of discipline but because sleep refuses to linger in a bed where warmth once lived. My chambers overlook the northern cliffs, endless snow, endless silence. Below, the wolves of the palace guards change shifts, their howls cutting through the dawn. I watch them sometimes, envy their simplicity. They know who they belong to. They know who would bleed for them. No one bleeds for me. When Kael returns from the wars, the palace trembles with life. The soldiers sing of victory. Servants rush through the halls, preparing banquets to honor their triumphant king. The city erupts in celebration, wine flows, and the moon is praised for her chosen son. But none of it touches me. I am neither wife nor widow, neither claimed nor released. I exist in a purgatory of gold and silence. Prade. The courtiers have long since stopped pretending. When I enter the great hall, they bow out of habit, not loyalty. I hear the gossip when I pass, I always hear it. She still wears his crest, one whispers. She must hope he'll remember her, says another. And then, the one that cuts deepest of all. He took another after the war, the shadow priestess from the Eastern Front. They say she sleeps in his chambers now. I do not confirm or deny. I have learned that silence is its own armor. The council still addresses me as Your Majesty, but I see the pity in their eyes. They know what I am, the untouched queen, the forgotten mate. Position. The political truce wrapped in silk. Sometimes I wonder if Kael still dreams of me. The mark suggests he must, though dreams are a poor substitute for love. The bond between us hums faintly still, like an old melody too stubborn to die. I feel it most when I walk the corridors at night, that invisible tether that binds me to the man who no longer looks my way. A phantom ache, pulsing low in my chest. My wolf stirs restlessly beneath my skin, her instincts wounded and directionless. He's alive, she reminds me. Then let him live, I whisper back. I am done dying for him. But I am not done, not truly. Because no matter how I lie to myself, I feel him when he enters the keep, even from the farthest tower. The air changes. The servants' laughter sharpens, their steps grow cautious, and my pulse betrays me before reason catches up. It's as if my heart remembers what my pride refuses to. Once, he was everything. The warrior who conquered the northern realms. The Alpha whose name made even the old gods bow. The man whose touch could silence the chaos in my mind. I believed in him the way others believed in divinity, until the day he decided that love was his greatest weakness. He told me once, the night before the coronation, a king cannot afford softness, Elaria. I had smiled then, young and naive, thinking he meant the world, not me. But when the wars came, he proved his words. He built an empire on power and distance. I became an ornament proof of alliance, not affection. And yet, the bond refused to die. There are nights when I wake to the phantom sensation of a hand at my throat. Not cruel, just familiar. I still smell his storm scent in dreams, that blend of smoke and pine. My body remembers every touch he withheld, every word he didn't say. The moon did not bind us for convenience. She bound us because she thought we were eternal. She was wrong. Or perhaps she knew something I didn't. Because lately, when I look at the mark faintly burning under my skin, I feel something different. Not longing, not grief, but warning. As if the bond is stirring again. As if somewhere, across this castle of ghosts and wars, the man who forgot me has started to remember. And my wolf, traitorous as ever, lifts her head and whispers into the dark, "He's coming." The palace has always known how to celebrate what it does not understand. By dawn, the banners of the Silver Keep had been changed, my crest, the moon of unity, replaced with the blazing wolf of conquest. Flowers lined the marble steps where soldiers once knelt to bless their queen. Now they honor another. The servants moved through the corridors like ghosts of memory, draping scarlet instead of silver, laughter trembling under the weight of obedience. It was the renewal ceremony, the Alpha King's commemoration of victory after a decade of war. But this year, there was more than triumph to be honored. There was a woman, the one who stood beside him on the battlefield, the one who, they whispered, had done what his own queen could not reach him. The courtiers called her the victory mate. I did not know her name. I had never needed to. My summons came sealed in gold and ash. Her Majesty, Queen Elaria Valen, is required by decree to attend the renewal ceremony at dusk. Her presence shall honor the continuity of the crown. There was no signature, no note, not even his mark, just the weight of a command disguised as courtesy. I stood by the window as the carriages rolled through the gates, each carrying nobles dressed for the occasion, their jewels catching the sunlight like sharpened laughter. My reflection stared back at me, pale, still, ageless in grief. I had not aged in the decade of his absence. The bond had preserved me, as if mocking my endurance. When I entered the hall that evening, the sound struck me first. Music, laughter, the rhythmic chant of his name, Kael Valen, the unbroken Alpha, the Iron Heart. I wondered if any of them remembered that I was once his heart too. The Hall of Victory shimmered with candlelight and pride. At the far end, beneath an arch carved from obsidian, stood the throne. He stood beside it taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, shadows carved into the angles of his face like history itself had sculpted him. My wolf stirred painfully. He's alive. He wore his crown differently now, not like a burden, but like armor. The war had stripped away the boy who used to smile at dawn, and left behind a king who didn't know how. His eyes scanned the crowd lazily, detached until they found me. The moment our gazes met, I forgot how to breathe. 10 years dissolved like mist. The music faded. The walls of the hall disappeared, and there was only him, the man who had not touched me in a decade, looking as if he had seen a ghost. His expression faltered, just for a second. It was small, almost imperceptible, the kind of break only a bonded heart could feel. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, and I felt the faintest tug in the bond, that old thread of fire that refused to die. And then I saw it. Around his wrist, hidden beneath layers of ceremonial armor, glinted a familiar silver band. Our mating band, the one he'd sworn to discard. The one I'd burned in the hearth 10 years ago, to stop myself from believing he might still care. My composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. I turned my gaze away before he could see it, before the trembling reached my lips. My nails dug into my palms beneath my gloves, grounding me in pain. The mark on my collarbone pulsed once, sharply, as if mocking me for daring to feel. The high priestess stepped forward, reciting blessings for the king's renewed rule. And beside him, the woman his supposed victory mate stood radiant in crimson, her hand resting delicately on his arm. She was younger, proud, beautiful in the way sunlight is beautiful, too bright, too loud, without mercy. When the priestess invoked the names of the moon and the wolf, I felt the pull again. The bond hummed through me, answering her chant like a curse. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of it. Kael shifted, as if sensing it too. His hand fell instinctively to his chest, right above the place where our bond had once flared under the moon's fire. He shouldn't have felt it. Not after all this time. Yet he did. For a heartbeat or maybe eternity, his control faltered. The Alpha King, the conqueror of nations, looked at me like a man who'd woken from a decade-long sleep. His lips parted, soundless. The crowd clapped, oblivious to the fracture opening between us. Then he looked away. And I remembered what silence feels like when it becomes armor. The rest of the ceremony blurred into noise. Applause, toasts, speeches about honor and loyalty, words that meant nothing to those who had never waded through 10 winters alone. When the hall emptied and the torches burned low, I lingered in the shadows. He stood at the far end, his back to me, head bowed as if carrying an invisible weight. I thought foolishly that he might turn. But he didn't. He only reached for his wrist, his thumb brushing the silver band once before he let his hand fall. And that was enough to break me all over again. I left before dawn. The corridors felt longer than ever, the silence colder. The bond, once dormant, pulsed faintly beneath my skin, alive again. For 10 years, I had taught myself to forget him. But now, with one glance, one look across a room drenched in light and lies, he had remembered me. And the cruelest part? So had I. I still remember the night he stopped reaching for me. It was the night the kingdom celebrated his coronation, the night the gods, the council, and the wolves of the realm hailed Kael Valen as the chosen Alpha King. The air had been heavy with incense and promise, the scent of fire lilies thick enough to choke. We were both so young then, 2 hearts bound by destiny, 2 wolves believing that love would be enough to survive the weight of the crown. It wasn't. When the festivities ended and the torches dimmed, he came to me in silence. Still dressed in the ceremonial cloak, his crown crooked on his head, his eyes once so alive, distant. I reached for him as I always had, a simple touch on his arm, grounding, familiar. But this time he flinched. Not tonight, Elaria. Just 3 words, cold, precise. They shattered something in me that night, something soft and irreplaceable. He stood by the window, staring at the horizon as if the kingdom beyond it could give him what I could not. The moonlight carved him in silver, beautiful and unreachable. "You're trembling," I whispered. "You've been since the ceremony." His voice came quiet, but sharp as a blade. "I can't afford to tremble anymore. Kael and—" He turned, and in his eyes I saw it, the fear he'd never admit. "You think this bond makes me stronger, Elaria. It doesn't. It weakens me. Every time I look at you, I remember I'm still human, and an alpha cannot be human." The words hung between us, heavier than the crown on his head. I took a step forward, but he raised a hand, halting me. "Don't," he said softly, and there was pain in it, real and raw. "Don't make this harder." The mark on my collarbone burned that night, wild and alive, begging him not to say the words he was about to. He did anyway. I release you from the bond. For a heartbeat, everything stopped, my breath, my pulse, the world itself. But the mark did not fade. It flared in defiance, glowing so bright it hurt to look at. I gasped, my body trembling as the moon herself seemed to laugh at his arrogance. He turned away, ashamed. Why won't it die? Because it isn't a chain, Kael, I whispered. It's a promise. He didn't answer. He just left the door closing with a finality that echoed through years. Now, a decade later, I stand in the same chamber. The walls haven't aged, only I have. The world calls him unbreakable, the Alpha King, who tamed nations, who led his armies through flame and ruin. But I know better. Beneath the steel, beneath the glory, there's still a man afraid of love, afraid of what it makes him remember. They say his heart turned to stone the day he ascended the throne. I know when it truly happened, the night he chose power over peace, fear over tenderness. The night he let me go, yet never truly did. Because despite his command, despite his rejection, the bond never severed. It lived in defiance of him, of everything his lineage taught him to believe. And perhaps that's the cruelest part. He built an empire to forget me, but his own body betrayed him. Even now, Kael hides the mark that never faded, a small scar over his heart, faintly silver, faintly alive. He conceals it under armor, under robes of state, beneath the weight of crowns and glory. But I know because I feel it too, that pulse between us, steady as a second heartbeat. They tell me he dreams restlessly, that sometimes, in the depths of night, the guards hear his wolf stir, that he calls a name in his sleep, one he never speaks when he's awake. My name, Elaria. I wonder if he wakes ashamed or relieved. If he tells himself it's just a dream, a trick of the bond that refuses to die. Or if, in those quiet moments before dawn, he presses his hand over his chest and feels what I feel, the burn of something he tried to kill but couldn't. I used to think that made us cursed. Now I think it makes us bound not by the gods, not by the moon, but by the very thing he feared most: love. Because even kings can't conquer what they deny in themselves. And Kael, for all his might, has spent 10 years fighting a ghost only he can hear. Sometimes, I wonder if he'll ever stop running. Other times, I think he already has in his dreams, in his sleepless nights, where my scent still lingers and my name still tastes like mercy. And though I'll never say it aloud, not to the council, not to the servants, not even to the wind that carries his howls across the cliffs, I still feel it too, that wound beneath his crown, the one neither time, nor pride, nor distance could heal. There are places in the palace where his voice cannot reach. The lower courts tucked behind the marble colonnades, and the smoke-stained infirmary halls belong to me. They always have. Here, no one calls me Your Majesty. They call me Lady of the Lower Wing, the Silent Queen, sometimes just Elaria. Titles are for those who crave attention. I have learned to build my reign from silence. I spend my days listening to farmers, soldiers, widows, and orphans, to the ones who were forgotten while Kael fought his endless wars. They bring me broken contracts, wounded pride, burned hands. I heal what I can, and for what I cannot, I listen until their voices stop trembling. I think that is what power truly is, not the ability to command, but to soothe. The council thinks my presence here is an act of humility. They don't see the strategy. A woman can hear much when no one fears her. Courtiers. The courtiers believe I live in exile. In truth, I am gathering a kingdom beneath his, one made not of fear, but of faith. This morning, A messenger came from the northern garrisons, a boy no older than 17, his uniform torn, his left arm bound in a bloody sling. He bowed awkwardly before me, eyes wide as though unsure if he should meet my gaze. "Your Majesty," he whispered, the words trembling. "They said you would listen." And so I did. He told me of villages refusing to pay tribute, of crops hoarded instead of sent to the capital, of whispers that the North no longer bends to the Alpha King, that they follow another name now, a name spoken with reverence instead of fear. Mine. The room fell silent after he said it. Even the candles seemed to hesitate. I dismissed the guards before I spoke. "And who told you this?" "The people, my queen," he said. "They say, when they cry for mercy, it's your name that reaches them, not his." I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt the cold weight of inevitability. Kael had built an empire through dominance. I had tended its wounds through compassion. And now, the cracks between those two worlds had become too wide to ignore. When I sent the messenger away with medicine and food, I lingered at the window, watching the gray smoke rise from the training yards. The winter winds carried faint howls from the northern ridge, wolves restless in their cages, mirroring the unrest of men. That evening, the council summoned me. I rarely attend their meetings anymore, but their tone held unease, and I have learned that unease is always worth hearing. The chamber smelled of iron and politics. Kael sat at the head of the obsidian table, a king carved from ice. His eyes flicked up when I entered, but only briefly, as though acknowledging me might melt the discipline he clung to. "Your Majesty," said Chancellor Renard, his tone tight. "We've received concerning reports from the north. Villages are withholding allegiance. Our scouts say a movement is forming." Kael didn't speak. He sat in stillness, jaw clenched, fingers tapping once against the armrest, a habit he developed when restraining his temper. I kept my voice steady. "And what does the movement claim?" Renard hesitated. "They claim loyalty to the Queen." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kael's hand froze mid-tap. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine, and for the first time in 10 years, there was something human in it. Not anger. Not authority. Fear. "They use your seal," Renard continued nervously. "Your crest appears on letters, supplies, even banners. Whether they act with or without your command, they believe they do so in your name." Kael rose then sudden, deliberate, the chair scraping against stone. "Leave us." The council scattered like startled birds, leaving only the two of us. He didn't look at me at first. His voice came low, strained. "Do you know what it means when a kingdom speaks your name more than its king's?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It means they remember who listened." His eyes snapped to mine, cold and wounded all at once. "You think I don't listen?" "You listen to loyalty," I said, "not to pain." For a moment, neither of us moved. The fire behind him flickered, shadows clawing up the walls, like echoes of what we once were, two wolves circling something neither could name. Then he spoke softer than I expected. "They call you the Queen of Silence." Plost. "I know." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "And I thought silence was what I wanted." There was something in his tone, not regret exactly, but the awareness of it, the kind that comes too late. He looked at me like a man, seeing the ruin of his own choices. And for the first time since the wars began, the Alpha King seemed afraid. Not of rebellion. Not of losing the throne, but of losing the one thing he had already thrown away me. And though my heart ached to see him like that, I did not move toward him. Because love, once silenced, learns to speak only through distance. The moon has a cruel sense of timing. Tonight, the kingdom celebrates her feast, the night of true bonds. Every decade, under her fullest light, the moon chooses which ties will endure and which will wither. Lovers renew their vows, mates reaffirm their oaths, and every wolf in the realm feels her pulse through the blood. It is a sacred night, a merciless one. I hadn't attended a moon's feast since the year Kael and I were bound. That night, his hand had trembled against mine, as the light seared through our skin, marking us as one. The memory feels like something belonging to another lifetime, and yet, tonight, the mark hums again beneath my skin as though it remembers for me. I tell myself it's imagination, some cruel trick of memory. But when the moon rises pale, vast, and watching the air itself shifts, the bond stirs like an ember buried beneath ash, reluctant but alive. The first spark hits just before midnight, a warmth along my collarbone, faint at first, then sharp, almost electric. I press my palm over the spot, but the heat only deepens, spreading through my ribs, curling into my pulse. My breath catches. No, it can't be. It's been 10 years since that night, 10 years since Kael tried to sever what couldn't be broken. The bond should have faded long ago. But as the moonlight fills my chambers, it ignites. The mark flares. I stumble toward the mirror. The fabric of my gown slips from my shoulder, revealing the faint scar I'd carried for a decade, pale silver, barely visible under skin. Now, it glows with white fire, alive again, burning the shape of the moon's crest. I bite down a cry, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turn white. My wolf wakes instantly, wild, trembling, desperate. He feels it, she whispers inside me. He feels it too. I shake my head. No, he can't. But the bond doesn't lie. Across the distance, across marble halls and endless pride, something inside me reaches outward, and something answers. A flash, a surge like lightning between hearts. My knees give way. I fall against the cold stone, every nerve burning with memory. Far across the city, in the royal wing, I can feel it, Kael's pain. His heartbeat echoes mine, erratic and ragged. The bond thrums with unbearable force, raw and alive. He must be feeling it, the same fire that branded us beneath the moon's eye 10 years ago. Somewhere deep within him, his wolf must be clawing its way free. The bond has no patience for reason or regret. It remembers only what is true. I don't know how long I kneel there, gasping, trembling, caught between past and present. The pain turns to light, the light to heat, and the heat to something almost holy. I see flashes, his hands over mine, the night of our binding, his whispered promise before everything fell apart. The moon will never unmake what she's claimed. He had said it like a vow, and I had believed him. I hate that some part of me still does. The door bursts open. My maid rushes in, wide-eyed. "Your Majesty the King." Her voice falters. Behind her, guards stand uneasy, their scent thick with confusion. "What about him?" I demand. Though my throat burns from the strain. "He's collapsed. The council says it's the moon's fever, but his wounds they glow, my queen." The same light as, she hesitates, eyes falling to my shoulder as yours. I turn away before she can see the truth written across my face. "Leave me." When the door shuts, I press a trembling hand over the mark again. It burns less now, not fading, but synchronizing. Two flames, finally breathing in rhythm after a decade of silence. The bond is no longer dormant, it's awake, and it's angry. Later that night, I sense him before I hear the guards. The castle hums with the quiet terror that only Kael's command can create. Heavy footsteps approach, muffled voices exchanging hurried words. By the time the knock comes, I already know what it means. The captain bows as he enters, unable to meet my eyes. Her Majesty is ordered to present herself in the royal wing at sunrise. By whose order? I ask, though I already know. The king's. He hesitates, glancing at my collarbone where the faint glow still lingers. He said the moon demanded it. I dismiss him with a nod, but my heart is no longer still. The last time Kael summoned me, it was to end us. Now, under the moon's fire, he calls for me again, not as ruler, not as conqueror, but as the man who feels my heartbeat inside his own. And for the first time in 10 years, I don't know whether to go to him out of duty, defiance, or something far more dangerous. Because the bond isn't asking anymore. It's pulling. The summons arrived before dawn, carried by the same guards who once bowed at my feet. By decree of the crown, Her Majesty Queen Elaria Valen is ordered to present herself in the royal wing immediately, upon the king's command. No seal, no apology. Just the weight of authority, pressed into paper and silence. For a long moment, I only stared at it. The parchment trembled faintly in my hands, not from fear, but from the pull beneath my skin. The mark throbbed again, faint and insistent, as if the bond itself had grown impatient. I tore the letter in half. The guards exchanged glances, uncertain. Once, they would have dragged me by force if he willed it, but that time has passed. Even they know what I've become, something neither subservient nor replaceable, something he cannot command. You'll tell your king, I said, steady as ice, that the queen does not obey like a soldier. The older of the two hesitated. Your Majesty, his orders were direct. I turned to him slowly. So is my refusal. He bowed low, more out of discomfort than loyalty, and left without argument. The sound of their boots faded down the corridor, leaving only the hush of morning. I thought that would be the end of it. But of course, Kael Valen has never tolerated silence, not when it comes from me. He came himself. By nightfall, the palace trembled. Word spread quickly through the lower courts. The Alpha King had left the council mid-session and was storming toward the Queen's wing. Servants scattered like frightened birds. Even the guards at my door looked pale, uncertain whether to stand their ground or kneel. I stayed seated by the fire, pretending calm I did not feel. My pulse betrayed me too loud, too fast, and my wolf stirred beneath my skin, restless. When the door opened, he filled the threshold like a shadow cut from moonlight and fury. Everyone, leave. His command hit the air like thunder. No one argued. Within seconds, we were alone. He closed the door behind him but did not move closer. His armor was gone, replaced by black linen, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, as though he'd come not as a king, but as a man stripped bare. Still, power clung to him, that quiet, consuming presence that used to terrify and steady me all at once. I sent for you, he said finally. I know, I answered. You ignored me. I did. A muscle in his jaw flexed. Do you think you can defy the crown? I rose slowly, letting the firelight catch on the faint silver mark across my collarbone, the one that had burned because of him, that had never healed because of him. I'm not defying the crown, I said. I'm defying you. He exhaled sharply, taking a step forward. It's the same thing. No, I whispered. It used to be, but not anymore. His eyes, dark gold, storm-heavy, flickered. The bond pulsed between us, raw and alive. I could feel his heartbeat through it, uneven, desperate. Why are you doing this? He asked. After everything. You mean after nothing? I cut in. After 10 years of silence, After being your queen in name but not in life, after being told that love makes you weak, his hands clenched at his sides. It does. Closer. Then tell me, I said softly, stepping closer until the air between us vibrated. Why do you look at me like this now? He didn't answer. His chest rose and fell too quickly, and I saw the truth in his silence, the same ache, the same hunger, the same years of denial. Finally, he broke. His voice cracked like something inside him had splintered, because the silence is killing me. For a heartbeat, I almost forgot how to breathe. The fire hissed quietly beside us, throwing shadows against the walls. He looked nothing like the king the world feared. The conqueror, the wolf of iron, all gone. Before me stood the man who had once trembled on our wedding night, the one who had held me like I was his salvation, not his undoing. And for a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity isn't love, and forgiveness isn't duty. I lifted my chin, forcing my voice to remain steady even as my pulse threatened to betray me. You should have thought of that, I said quietly, before you killed us. And the words landed like a blade, clean, final. He flinched, the faintest tremor passing through him, and for the first time, I saw him look away. The Alpha King, who never bowed, could not meet my gaze. Power sive. The silence between us stretched not peaceful this time, but sharp as frost. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there long after he was gone, my hand pressed over the mark that still burned beneath my skin. It pulsed once, not in pain this time, but in warning, because something had changed tonight. For 10 years, Kael Valen had been the king of silence, but now the silence belonged to me. Chaos does not arrive with thunder. It slips quietly through the cracks, pride leaves behind. By the time the snow began to fall over the Silver Keep, the kingdom had already started to rot from the inside. Assassination attempts in the capital, treaties dissolving like ink in rain, and noble houses turning their allegiance to whoever promised safety from the crumbling crown. Everywhere I went, I could taste the fear beneath the civility, that sharp, metallic scent of desperation. And beneath it all, one whisper kept spreading like wildfire through the courts. The Alpha King has lost the moon's favor. The bond is unfulfilled. The queen is untouched. The wolves are turning restless. They weren't entirely wrong. The mark still pulsed on my skin like a living wound, but it no longer sang. It throbbed dully, like a heart that refused to stop beating out of sheer spite. I had not seen Kael since that night, the night he came to my chamber, demanding obedience and leaving with humiliation instead. Since then, he had buried himself in councils and war rooms, pretending to rule while the realm unraveled around him. But even in his absence, I felt him everywhere. His presence bled through the corridors, through the men who still feared him, through the shadows that never fully left his name. And yet, every time I entered the infirmary or the lower courts, their fear softened into something else. Hope, perhaps. The soldiers still wounded from the border. Wars came to me for healing, not command. The farmers came to me for mercy, not order. The orphans, the ones left behind by his endless wars, learned to smile when I passed. They called me the queen who listens. Kael once told me gentleness was a weakness, that softness had no place beside a throne. But I've learned that softness, when carried long enough, becomes steel. And now, as the palace crumbled under political fracture, it was my softness that kept it standing. I saw him again after nearly a month, not as a king addressing his court, but as a man observing from shadows. It was the night after an assassination attempt on the northern envoy. The wounded had been brought into the lower hall. I knelt among them, sleeves rolled, hands blood-stained. My wolf helped where my words could not, steadying hearts, stitching flesh, easing pain. The healers worked silently beside me, but I could feel his gaze long before I looked up. Kael stood by the archway, watching. His armor was still half-fastened, the emblem of his crown dim beneath the torchlight. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were raw. For years I had longed for him to look at me. Now that he did, I wished he wouldn't. Because what I saw there wasn't just sorrow, it was jealousy. Jealousy of every wounded soldier who met my gaze and whispered thank you, of every soul who bowed to me not from fear, but from love. Of every moment I existed beyond his control. When our eyes met, the air shifted. The hall seemed to shrink until there was nothing but the two of us and the ghosts between us. He turned away first. Always first. Later that night, when the castle had gone quiet, I heard him before I saw him. The low growl of his wolf echoing through the stone corridors not of rage, but of longing. I found him in the training yard, under the pale light of the moon, shirt discarded, hands braced against the cold stone wall, as if holding himself upright required all his strength. His breath came ragged. The mark on his chest, the one that matched mine, glowed faintly through sweat and skin. He didn't notice me at first. He was fighting something only he could hear. His wolf restless, desperate, clawing to surface. When he finally turned, his eyes were not human. Elaria, he rasped. My name broke from his throat like a prayer. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I replied softly. Siomaris. He laughed bitterly, dragging a hand through his hair. You think I have a choice? It's inside me again? The bond, the moon's curse. It won't let me rest. It's not a curse, I said. It's what you tried to kill. His jaw tightened. And yet it still lives, like everything I failed to destroy. He looked away, his voice breaking. You heal strangers, but not me. I took a breath, steady but shaking. You never asked to be healed, Kael. You asked to be obeyed. He flinched at that. For a moment, silence hung between us, fragile and unbearable. Then, quieter, almost as if he didn't mean for me to hear it, he whispered, My wolf still kneels for you, every night. The confession hit me harder than any command ever could. But I didn't move toward him. I couldn't. Because I knew the truth buried inside his words. The man still refused to kneel, even if the wolf remembered how. So I turned away before he could see the ache in my eyes. Behind me, I heard him whisper my name again, not as a king, not as an alpha, but as something far more human. Elaria. The sound of it trembled through the air, followed by silence. And for the first time in years, I realized the truth neither of us could bear to say aloud. He hadn't forgotten how to love me, only how to kneel. There comes a moment when even ghosts grow tired of haunting the same halls. For 10 years, I had stayed out of duty, out of pride, perhaps even out of hope. But hope, when starved too long, curdles into quiet resignation, and mine had done just that. The palace no longer felt like home. The marble floors still gleamed, the banners still hung, and the people still whispered, Your Majesty when I passed, but the title meant nothing. A queen without a heart beside her is not a queen, only a figurehead wrapped in silk and silence. So I decided to leave. The decision came at dawn, the hour when the world still pretends it can begin again. I packed little a few gowns, a silver ring that once fit his finger, and the journal I'd written in when the silence became too loud. I told no one but the guards at my wing. Even they looked away, pretending not to see the crownless woman walking toward exile. As I crossed the last corridor, the bond pulsed faintly beneath my skin, aware. He will feel it, my wolf murmured. He always does. I hope not, I whispered. This time I want him to feel nothing. But of course, the moon never listens to liars. By the time I reached the palace gates, the courtyard had gathered a quiet storm of movement. The guards stood rigid, glancing at one another with the nervous energy of men caught between oaths. The gates were open, the horizon spilling its silver light like an invitation. Freedom. I took one step forward, then another. Power. Elaria. His voice cracked the air like thunder. I froze. Kael's presence, hit before I saw him. That old, unmistakable power, the command that made even the air tremble. But when I turned, what approached was not the invincible Alpha King the world revered. It was a man unraveling. He strode across the courtyard, cloak half-fastened, eyes dark with something that looked too much like panic. The guards bowed instinctively, but he didn't spare them a glance. His focus was only on me. Where do you think you're going? His voice was sharp, but the edges frayed. Anywhere but here, I said quietly. You won't have to hear my silence anymore. His jaw tightened. You can't just walk away. I already have. He moved closer. You belong to this kingdom. I met his gaze. No, I belong to us. And you killed that kingdom yourself. Something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, disbelief, maybe both. You think leaving will fix what's broken? I think staying will keep it that way. The mark beneath my collarbone burned faintly, reacting to the storm gathering between us. Around us, the court began to gather nobles, guards, servants drawn by the gravity of what they sensed was about to happen. The moon was still high, pale, and pitiless. Kael's voice dropped, quieter now, raw. Don't do this. Then give me a reason to stay. He hesitated, and that hesitation was the answer. So I turned back toward the gate. But I hadn't taken more than 3 steps before the world shifted. The air rippled. The ground itself seemed to vibrate with his wolf's energy, the aura of an alpha losing control. I stopped, not out of fear, but because the power of it made the air hard to breathe. Elaria, please. That word please from his mouth almost undid me. When I faced him again, his expression was no longer regal or cold. It was broken. His shoulders trembled, his hands clenched at his sides as if holding himself together required willpower alone. Then, before the eyes of the court, before the nobles who would spin this moment into legend or scandal, the Alpha King did what no one believed possible. He fell to his knees. The sound of it armor striking stone echoed through the courtyard like the shattering of a kingdom. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, but Kael didn't hear them. He was no longer a king. He was just a man, pair. For 10 years, he said, voice shaking. I ruled a kingdom, but never myself. He looked up at me, eyes gleaming under the cold light. I beg you, Elaria, teach me how to be the man my wolf remembers. The bond between us ignited, fierce and alive, flooding my senses with the memory of what once was the scent of fire lilies, the warmth of his hand, the vow beneath the moon's gaze. But I did not move toward him. He knelt. I stood. And for the first time in our long and tangled history, the balance of power shifted. The courtiers waited for my reaction, expecting tears, a touch, perhaps even forgiveness. But my heart was not made for spectacle. I looked at the man before me, proud, broken, and begging, and I spoke with a calmness that cut deeper than any cry. Rise when you remember who you're kneeling for, the queen you buried, or the woman you lost. He flinched. The crowd held its breath. And then I walked past him, not as a runaway, but as someone finally free enough to be followed, behind me. His voice trembled through the courtyard once more, low, reverent, and fractured. Elaria. This time, I didn't turn. Because the man who once believed love was weakness was finally learning what it meant to kneel, and I was finally learning how to stand. Pain. They say truth is a kind of fire. It burns what it touches, but what survives the flame becomes something purer. I had walked away from the courtyard that night without looking back, but the image of Kael on his knees haunted me like a brand. For 10 years, I had begged the moon to let him feel what I had felt, to make him understand loss the way I had lived it. Yet when it finally happened, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something I had sworn I'd never face again. He sent no guards this time, no summons written in royal decree. Only a single line, scrawled in his hand. If you want the truth, meet me where it all ended. The royal chapel. I almost didn't go, but the bond beneath my skin pulsed, steady and demanding, like a heartbeat knocking from inside a locked door. So I went, not for him, but for the ghost of us that refused to die. The chapel hadn't changed. White stone, moonlight spilling through the broken window where the first frost had once drifted in. It was where we had been mated under the moon's gaze. And later, where I had come alone to mourn a man still living. Kael stood by the altar, the candlelight catching in the silver of his hair. He wasn't wearing armor. No crown, no cloak. Just a simple black tunic, and the weight of years between us. You came, he said quietly. I didn't come to forgive, I replied. He nodded once, as if he'd expected that, then come to understand. I walked closer, each step deliberate, until the scent of him, cedar and storm, reached me again. Then start speaking, I said, Pi. For every year you kept me in silence, you'll give me truth. His throat worked. Ask me, Princess. Why did you abandon me? He exhaled, slow and ragged. Because I thought loving you would destroy me. Then you should have let it. He flinched, but didn't look away. You don't understand, my father. Your father's dead. Don't give him your tongue again. His jaw tightened. He's not dead where it matters. His curse lives in me, in every word I was raised on. Love weakens the bloodline. An alpha must conquer, not crave. Those were the first lessons I learned. And you believed him. I tried not to, he said, voice breaking. But the night I took you as my mate, I felt it, the bond, the pull, and I was terrified of what it would make me. You were the first thing that made me want to kneel, and I didn't know how to live with that. So you ran. I burned, he said hoarsely. Everything. The bed, the vows, the scent of you. I set fire to the room where you waited for me. Not because I hated you gods, never that, but because I hated myself for wanting you so much I could barely think. I thought if I destroyed the memory, I could destroy the weakness. My heart twisted, slow and cruel. And did it work? He closed his eyes. No. The fire died, but the bond didn't. I woke every night with your scent in my lungs, your voice in my head. My wolf howled for you, but I buried him too. I stood in silence. The same silence that had once condemned him, now wrapped around us like smoke, not to punish, but to judge. He looked up then, eyes glistening with a kind of vulnerability I had never seen in him. I told myself I could live without you. That ruling alone was strength. But I've come to understand I didn't rule at all. I hid. He took a step closer, then stopped, as if afraid his nearness would break something sacred. I feared that if I touched you again, I'd never stop, and that terrified me more than any enemy I've faced. The room felt too small, the air too heavy with everything unsaid. I swallowed hard. And whom did you love in my place? No one, he said. Not the women they said I took. Not the ones they offered. They were smoke, I touched them. only to remember what fire felt like. But none of them burned like you. The truth hurt. Not because it was cruel, but because it was real. For a long while, I said nothing. The silence stretched, trembling under the weight of all we'd become: a queen forged from pain, a king stripped of pride, two wolves who had forgotten how to speak without wounding. He looked down, almost defeated. Say something. I did not speak. Instead, I stepped closer, one slow, deliberate step at a time, until we stood within the same breath. I could feel his heart hammering through the mark on his chest, the one that had never faded. Then, for the first time in a decade, I touched him. My hand found the place over his heart, the same place my mark mirrored on my own skin. The heat beneath my palm was staggering, the bond leaping alive like lightning meeting earth. His breath caught, sharp and reverent. "Elaria," he whispered. "This," I said softly, "isn't forgiveness. It's truth. And truth, Kael, is always the first fire." He closed his eyes, trembling beneath my touch. Not as a king, not as an alpha, but as a man finally learning how to burn without destroying. And for the first time in 10 years, the silence between us didn't hurt. It healed. It began with thunder. Not the thunder of storm clouds, but the kind that comes from inside walls, from betrayal wrapped in steel. Kael and I had been in the council chamber when the first explosion shook the palace. The chandeliers trembled, the flames in the sconces flickered, and then came the screams, distant at first, then near. A messenger burst through the doors, blood on his face. "Your Majesty, the Western Gate treachery." Kael was on his feet before the man finished. "By whom?" The messenger hesitated, his gaze darting to me. "The concubines' clan, the House of Rhine. They've brought soldiers through the merchant tunnels. They think—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. They thought the king was unguarded, that the queen had weakened him, that love, once more, was his downfall. Kael's voice turned to steel. "Seal the gates, evacuate the courtyards, and find her." But she wouldn't be found, not until she was ready to be. Betrayal has a way of finding its own hour. By the time we reached the Great Hall, fire had already licked up the columns. The scent of smoke mingled with blood, a metallic heat that clung to every breath. I could hear the clash of blades, the snarl of wolves shifting, the distant toll of warning bells. The air burned. The world itself seemed to fracture. Kael turned to me, his eyes glowing with that same fierce light I once mistook for wrath. "Stay behind me," he said. I almost laughed. "I think you forget which of us was trained to heal wounds and which of us keeps causing them." He gave me a look sharp, helplessly fond, and then we were moving, side by side. The first wave of soldiers came through the shattered door. Their armor bore the Rhine crest, a coiled serpent devouring its own tail. They had once sworn loyalty to Kael. Now they shouted for his death. Kael met them head on. He was no longer the man kneeling in the courtyard. He was the wolf that had conquered kingdoms. Every strike, clean, lethal, unhesitating. But it wasn't just his battle. When one of the soldiers lunged toward him from the flank, I moved without thinking. My wolf rose through me, fierce and silent, silver eyes burning. I caught the attacker by the throat, the mark on my collarbone flaring like a second moon. We fought as one. Not king and queen, not Alpha and Luna, just Kael and Elaria, the bond alive, pulsing, radiant. When his blade swung, I followed. When my wolf struck, he shielded. The world narrowed to instinct and fire, and the rhythm of our shared heartbeat. Somewhere between the chaos, I heard him call my name not as command, but as plea. "Elaria." And then I saw it, the arrow. It cut through the smoke, black-feathered, poisoned, meant for him. I didn't think. I moved. Pain bloomed white-hot across my ribs as the arrow buried itself deep. The sound that tore from him wasn't human. His wolf broke through completely, shattering the last remnants of restraint. He caught me before I fell, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me against his chest as the hall burned around us. His hand pressed against the wound, trying to stem what could not be stopped. "Stay with me," he said, voice hoarse, trembling. "Do you hear me, Elaria? Don't you dare." "I told you," I whispered, the taste of smoke on my tongue. "Love doesn't make you weak." His tears fell hot against my skin. He lifted me, carrying me through the fire, through corridors collapsing into ash. The palace, our prison, our home crumbled behind us. The world glowed red and gold and ruinous. He stumbled once, knees buckling under both our weight. But he did not stop. His wolf howled beneath his skin, lending strength to a body already breaking. By the time we reached the courtyard, the moon had broken through the clouds, full and white, watching. The surviving soldiers stood frozen at the sight of their alpha king, carrying his dying mate, his face streaked with blood and grief. He fell to his knees in the ashes, cradling me in his lap, his hand trembling over my heart. "Please," he whispered, as if speaking to gods he had spent his life defying. "Take my kingdom, my name, my strength, but not her, not her." The wind shifted. The flames roared higher, as if answering him. My heartbeat faltered, slow, steady, then slowing more. Kael bent over me, pressing his forehead to mine. "Don't leave me in silence again," he begged. My lips moved faintly. "Then, listen," and then everything went still. He threw his head back, and the sound that ripped from him split the night, a howl so raw it silenced even the fire. It was not the cry of a king. It was the mourning of a mate, the sound of a man whose world had ended twice, once in pride, once in love. The moon hung above us, silver and merciless, witnessing the moment the Alpha King finally broke, not in defeat, but in devotion. And through the blaze that devoured our kingdom, his voice carried my name again and again, until even the flames seemed to bow. Between life and death, there is a silence so deep it sounds like the sea. I drifted there, weightless, untethered, without breath or pain. The world had burned away, and yet I could still feel him. Kael. His heartbeat wild, erratic, echoing through the bond we once tried to bury. It pulsed through me like a memory refusing to die. For a moment, I thought this was the end, not tragic, just inevitable. A queen slipping quietly from the story that had already taken too much. But then, somewhere beyond the stillness, I heard him. "Elaria," he whispered, not through sound, but through the bond itself, the tether between our souls. "Don't leave me." And for the first time in years, I listened. The darkness cracked open. When I awoke, the first thing I saw was light. Not sunlight that was too soft, too earthly, but moonlight, pouring down through the shattered dome of the courtyard like a river of silver flame. It bathed everything, the ruins, the smoke, the ashes, and at its center knelt Kael, his arms around me as though trying to hold the world itself together. His face was streaked with soot and tears. His armor was gone, torn from him in battle. His hands shook where they touched me, one pressed over my wound, the other tangled in my hair like he couldn't decide whether to heal or to worship. "Elaria." His voice broke on my name, soft as prayer, rough as confession. I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat was dry, my chest heavy. Then I felt it, the mark over my heart, glowing hot beneath my skin. It pulsed once, twice, and the pain that followed was almost divine. The bond. It wasn't fading. It was awakening. Light spread from my chest to his threads of white fire weaving between us, binding, branding, completing what a decade of pride had left undone. The moon's glow thickened, its light descending like a veil. Around us, time seemed to still. The fire dimmed, the air shimmered, and I realized we were standing or perhaps kneeling in something ancient, something sacred. The mate's vow. It was said to happen only once in 1,000 lifetimes, when two wolves defied death itself to find one another again. Kael's head bowed, his forehead rested against mine. "You were never my weakness," he said, voice trembling. "You were the only thing keeping me human." Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. He drew a shaky breath, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "The night I burned our bed, I thought I was killing the part of me that could fall, but it was the part that could rise I destroyed instead." "Kael." My voice cracked. He pulled back just enough for our eyes to meet. "I don't deserve you." "No," I said softly. "But the man kneeling before the moon is not the one who abandoned me." "Yeah." He closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek. "Then tell me, what am I now?" "The alpha who finally learned to kneel," I whispered. The bond pulsed, again bright, violent, whole. I felt his heartbeat sync with mine. The pain that had lived between us for so long melted into something purer, not forgiveness, but truth. The mark on his chest flared, silver light blooming outward, matching mine in perfect unison. For one endless breath, the world was nothing but light, warmth, and the sound of two hearts remembering how to beat together. And the glow faded. I found myself in his arms again, but this time, I was alive. Entirely, impossibly alive. Gasps rippled around us. Soldiers, servants, and nobles, all those who had survived the rebellion, stood frozen at the sight. They watched as the moon's light dimmed and the smoke cleared, revealing the king and queen bound by a mark that shone like living fire. I heard one of the healers whisper, "The bond of the Moon Queen, power." Another fell to his knees. Then another, and soon the entire courtyard bowed, not in fear, but reverence. Conten. The rebellion had been fierce, but rebellion cannot survive faith, and faith had returned, not in the throne, but in the hearts of the people who saw their king broken and remade. Kael looked up, his voice raw but sure. "The kingdom will stand again," he said, "because its queen does." He helped me to my feet. The world around us was still smoldering, but the sky was clear, the moon fading into dawn, the first rays of gold breaking over ash. I turned to him, resting my hand over his heart. "We are not what we were." "No," he said, his hand covering mine. "We are what the fire left." Page. Our wolves stirred within us, twin spirits, once divided, now whole. And for the first time in 10 long years, I understood what strength truly meant. Not command, not conquest, but the courage to love again. And as the morning light spread across the ruins, the people whispered it through the courtyard, through the city, through the kingdom reborn. The king's heart beats again. Peace has a quieter sound than war. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or drums. It comes in softer things, the rustle of banners restored, the laughter of children echoing down marble halls that once knew only silence, the gentle rhythm of a kingdom learning how to breathe again. Months have passed since the night of fire and reckoning. The rebellion was crushed not by blood, but by the sight of something greater. A king who wept, and a queen who forgave. They called it a miracle, though I think it was simply what love becomes when it stops asking for perfection. The palace still bears its scars, a cracked pillar, a blackened archway, a single burn mark across the throne dais that no mason has dared erase. Kael insisted we leave it there. "Let it remind us," he said, of what it cost to rebuild. And rebuild we did. The halls are brighter now. The courtiers walk with something almost like ease. The wolves of the northern packs have sworn loyalty anew, and trade routes that once ran red now hum with life. Power. The kingdom thrives not through conquest, but through steadiness, through hands that no longer strike first, but hold firm. I no longer wake alone. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I feel Kael beside me, his breath warm against my shoulder, his hand tracing idle circles where my mark glows faintly against his. There's still a wildness in him, but it no longer burns to destroy. It anchors him now, tempered by something stronger than dominance, devotion. He has learned, finally, that to kneel is not to bow in weakness, but to stand in love. This evening, the throne room is empty. The council has long since dispersed, their torches extinguished one by one, leaving only the pale light of the moon through the arched windows. I walk across the room slowly, my footsteps echoing against the marble, a rhythm both foreign and familiar. The twin thrones stand ahead, side by side, not raised as they once were, but level with the dais below. When Kael rebuilt this chamber, he lowered them himself. No one should have to look up to serve, he told me. Only across. He stands there now, alone, gazing at the moonlight spilling over the thrones. When he turns to face me, I see the years that have passed in the quiet lines near his eyes, the softened strength in his posture. The Alpha King, the man who once ruled through silence and fear, now carries his crown like a vow, not a weapon. He smiles faintly. You still walk like a queen inspecting her fortress. It's not a fortress anymore, I say. It's a home. He laughs, the sound low and steady. And a kingdom that listens to its queen. I tilt my head. Its king listens too these days. He takes a step closer, closing the space between us. For a long moment, neither of us speaks. The silence is not the old kind, not the suffocating stillness of distance, but a shared one, gentle and alive. When he finally moves, it is slow, deliberate. He lowers himself one knee against the marble floor, the other bent, his head bowed. For a heartbeat, my breath catches. The sight is familiar and entirely new. Not a king brought low by guilt, but a man bowing freely in love. Kael, I whisper. He looks up at me, eyes shining beneath the moon's glow. Once I knelt in shame, he says softly. Now I kneel in gratitude. The words settle between us, heavy and beautiful. He continues, voice trembling just enough to betray the truth beneath it. You taught me that strength is not the roar of command, but the courage to listen. That love does not chain, it frees. That a crown means nothing if it cannot bow. I step closer, until the edge of my gown brushes his shoulder. My hand lifts not in dismissal, but in reverence, and I place it beneath his chin, guiding him to meet my gaze. Then rise, I whisper. My king, my equal. He stands. The moonlight spills over us both, soft and unyielding, binding us once more beneath its gaze. Outside, the night wind stirs, the banners bearing our crest, two wolves intertwined beneath a single moon, once a symbol of conquest, now a promise of unity. Kael reaches for my hand, fingers threading through mine. His palm is warm, steady, human. We stand together before the thrones, not as rulers above our people, but as the first to understand what it truly means to serve them and each other. I look up at him, the faintest smile on my lips. The kingdom that once bowed to fear now kneels to love. And he squeezes my hand gently, eyes soft. And for 10 years, I ruled a kingdom, he says quietly, echoing the words we both know too well. but it took one woman's forgiveness to make me worthy of it. The moon's light fades into silver dawn, and for the first time in our long and restless reign, peace feels like something that might last.